I think we're moving into the era where the question is more important than the answer. And so rather than try to learn what the answer is, we should be asking, what is the question?
Mr. Vusit, thank you so much for gracing us. What brings joy to your life?
I have never experienced the kind of peace that I have now. There are a lot of us who are chasing our own shadows.
Right.
So success is not for its own sake. Now, what is interesting is the more things I stopped chasing, the more things chased me.
What are the skills I need to thrive and to achieve success?
To succeed in the world, you have to increase more of what you know. You have to connect more of how you interact with other human beings. I think we're moving into an era where emotional intelligence is going to be more important than IQ.
What's the mindset that African entrepreneurs and businessmen should shift?
Standards have to meet your rate and stage of development. So the first thing you need is a firm foundation. Are you clear on what you're doing and why you're doing it? If that part of the conversation is missing, then all we're going to do is we're going to reproduce the inequality that our continent has come from.
Classmates, give me a minute of your time. I want us to discuss something very important. Insurance. Insurance literally saves lives. And a lot of Kenyans, we avoid taking insurance because of the hefty premiums that you have to pay. Very understandable. So I came across a product and I was like, you know what, let me plug my classmates and CEOs. So Equity Insurance through Equity Bank can now finance all your insurance premiums. So what that means is unachukua insurance leo and tomorrow it's active. Why? Because Equity Bank has paid for all your insurance premiums. Then wewe unabaki ukisort Equity Bank with a very flexible payment plan. For me, it's a win-win, and anything that saves a life is important to me. So walk into any Equity branch or any of their agents or any of their digital channels and ask them about Equity Insurance. Now let's get back to class. Mr. Vusit, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence. You know, I meet a gentleman like yourself, and you're a global speaker, 3 times best-selling author, award-winning entrepreneur. And I think the first thing I'm usually curious about is, what are you currently obsessed about on a personal level? That is if you have time.
I should have asked for the questions up front, because that's actually a very good question. Yeah. What am I currently obsessed about on a personal level?
Yeah.
Probably my faith.
Okay.
Probably.
Right.
I think it's the one thing I'm spending the most amount of time on. And it's the one connection that I'm most intentional about trying to build. It's my connection with God.
Right. Interesting.
Not the answer you had coming.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I mean, I think we all have our seasons and our phases. So, you know, that's a very interesting, because I'm always looking up to guys who've achieved success, and I'm always like, okay, so what's ahead? And I mean, you've achieved a lot of success.
God is good.
Awesome. At this point in your life, what brings joy to your life?
What brings joy? Definitely my family, man.
Okay.
Yeah, like I have never experienced and known the kind of peace that I have now.
Wow.
I'm just at the most incredible amount of peace.
Right.
And I love this season of my life. So I'm very, very intentional about protecting that peace, preserving that peace. So yeah, definitely my family. Just good family time.
Right.
You can't pay me enough for that.
I mean, that's amazing to hear. Because I'm always curious. So does this rat race end where you're constantly hustling and working?
Yeah.
And I know for men, we get a lot of joy from the work, and when you try something new and it works out. So at some point, it's good to hear that at some point you slow down and you're like, no, family first.
Yeah, I think different people come to it at different stages.
Okay.
I think that there are a lot of us who are chasing our own shadows.
Right.
So success is not for its own sake. It's because it helps you fulfill something in you.
Right.
But once that thing that you're trying to fulfill, that void that you're trying to fill, once you fill it with the kind of peace I've found, You're not chasing anything. Now, what is interesting is the more, how do I explain this? The more things I stopped chasing, the more things chased me. I acquired more by no longer trying to acquire more. It's almost as if, it's crazy to explain, but I just, how do I say? It's almost as if the universe finds you. The thing you were chasing was always chasing you. You just had to wait. I'll explain it to you this way.
Okay.
Have you ever seen a dog chase its tail?
Yeah.
You've seen that, generally like small dogs when they're younger.
Right.
Right. They see a little thing on their head here, and they don't know what it is, and they try to chase it, but it's its own tail, and so the dog runs around in a circle.
Right.
Human beings are a lot like this. We spend most of our lives chasing the thing that we already have. If the dog just stops, tail already belongs to the dog. Your destiny's already fulfilled. The things you're going to achieve, you're going to achieve.
Damn, man.
Nothing is going to stand in your way.
So what you're saying is create more time to just pause.
You can't hear it. You can't hear it unless you are intentional about hearing it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm seated with Vusit, so definitely the conversation will be very much in terms of business and entrepreneurship. But I had to start from the personal before we kick into the business and entrepreneurship. And so you were here for the Youth Plus Festival.
Yeah.
I happened to be in one of the panels.
Yes, I saw that.
Thank you. And so people walk up to me, the younger generation, and, I'd want them to hear it from you. So I am 20, 21, 22 years old. I'm an African, whether it's Kenya, South Africa. I've just cleared college or campus. But the world is changing. It's a whole new digital world. What are the skills I need to thrive and to achieve success, whether it's career or business or entrepreneurship? Where do I start? How do I go about it?
So, amongst the conventional wisdoms has been that to succeed in the world, you have to increase more of what you know. I think one of the ways the world is changing now is to succeed in the world, you have to connect more of how you interact with other human beings. Okay. I think we're moving into an era where emotional intelligence is going to be more important than IQ.
Right. Okay.
Because you cannot out IQ a computer.
That's true.
So what are you chasing? So the algebraic equations we're taught to solve in school, the code that we're taught to write at technical school, the technical problems we're taught to solve at technical colleges, the mathematical problems we're taught to solve, the accounting problems we're taught to solve, all of those can today be solved by a software that is infinitely faster than you and learning at a rate much faster than you can learn.
Right.
And so I found a lot of the entrepreneurs that I mentor and coach, the conversation is a lot less about how do you become smarter and a lot more about how do you know what the question is in the first place.
Right.
Let me say it differently. It used to be that you and I, when we were studying for exams, would obsess over the answers.
Yeah.
And so if you remember when you were preparing for exams, you got old exam papers.
Yeah.
And then you'd work the old exam paper.
Right.
Because you were trying to learn the answer.
Yeah.
I think we're moving into the era where the question is more important than the answer. And so rather than try to learn what the answer is, we should be asking, what is the question? Oof. Let me put it to you. Let me bring it home here in Kenya.
Yeah.
So how do Kenyan youth build high growth enterprises in a world where there is no aid funding for Kenyan businesses? That's the question you guys are going to have to solve. Because it's pretty clear that the dynamics of aid funding into the rest of Africa are about to change.
Oh, yeah.
Those are the questions we need to solve. So if I'm a young person
right.
and I'm thinking about what does the rest of my life look like, what does my trajectory look like, the philosophical question isn't what are the answers. The philosophical question is what is the question? What questions are we asking? How do we build, a more inclusive society?
Yeah.
How do we build a country and a continent that is dependent on itself and not dependent on others?
I mean, that will definitely be my follow-up question. I mean, we're in Africa. Africa is our business, but, Africa breaks my heart.
Yeah.
Because the challenges and the opportunities to build, for example, a unicorn in Africa is just really slim.
Sure.
Man, for me as a businessman, what should I be changing? How should I be thinking? And is it even possible for the younger generation to build bigger
I've got a very controversial view on this, but I don't think Africans should be trying to build unicorns.
Oh, man. Yeah?
Yeah. the Silicon Valley, the Silicon Valleying of Africa is actually incredibly short-sighted and very toxic. Just this morning, I had a meeting with one of the leading venture capital funds in the continent.
Right.
They've been operating for 11 years, and I was talking to the managing partner, and we were actually talking about why the traditional venture capital model is actually wrong for Africa. It fails us.
Okay.
We should not be trying to build a unicorn. A unicorn is $1 billion valuation business. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that. Let me. I've got a couple of thoughts. So let me just spread this out.
Yeah.
Doing business in North America is a financial thing.
Yeah.
You do business because you want to make money.
Right.
And the reason is because the societies are so advanced and so well developed that one of the best ways you can contribute to that society is by adding financial value to that society. Doing business in Europe is in part a financial thing. And we were looking at this in the company the other day. We looked at the world's top 100 largest companies in beginning of the 20th century, 1900s. And then if you look at the beginning of the 21st century. And one of the things you notice is the reduction of the European companies in the world's top 100 largest companies.
Yes.
Right. So who would they have been? Would have been, I don't know, Royal Dutch Shell. Right. And you can count them. It's still the same companies today. They don't want to admit it, but with the greatest of respect, Europe stopped innovating 100 years ago.
That is true.
Right. And so, and it's not hard to see. It's because just look at the number of large companies. Now, because we were colonized by the Europeans, one of the things the Europeans did is they embedded in Africa European risk management frameworks. This is why African banks don't lend to African businesses. Because we're using European credit scoring and risk models to think about the development of our own economies. But to be clear, when European standards were imposed on Africa, Europe was far more developed than Africa was.
That is true.
Standards have to meet your rate and stage of development. You can't have a set of standards that is inconsistent with your level of development because rather than the standard improve the economy, it's going to suppress people.
Right.
And you see it here, the amount of regulation that large institutions have to operate under means that a lot of them can't be innovative. But our economies, all of us in Africa, our economies are dominated by large companies. So if large companies aren't being innovative, it means they're not creating new value, which means our economies aren't growing. Now, if you go and ask a CEO of any large bank in Africa and say, why is your innovation index so low? If they're honest, it is low because they run their own internal scores, which tell them a different story. But in their hearts, they know. They know that their innovation indexes are very, very low. And you're going to ask them, why is your innovation index so low? They'll tell you, regulation doesn't allow me to do these things.
Right.
But who wrote the regulation? And when they wrote it, what was their standard of development in their society? So in Europe, if you do business as an entrepreneur, you are adding in part to kind of the financial system, but you're also trying to drive innovation, right? Think about the founder, for instance, of Klarna, right? These kind of new entrepreneurs in Europe, one of the things they're having to do is to innovate and show that Europe can innovate at the rate of North America.
Right.
Now let's talk about Africa. If you do business here, sure, it's important that you make money. Of course, it's important that you make money. But for us, business is a lot more about, if you and I succeed in business, this conversation we're having here today, this podcast is about 12 people in this room. Your innovation, your thinking, and your taking the risk has created 12 jobs.
Right.
Each of these people are probably supporting a family of 5. 12 by 5 is 40. This conversation is supporting 40 mouths. That's how business is different in Africa. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. So if I'm chasing a valuation of $1 billion business, it means that the number one metric I'm chasing is valuation. I'm not chasing social impact. Now, a lot of these startups and companies and the VCs that back them and the LPs that back the VCs that back them will tell them, no, but we've got impact scores in our metric. Sure. But I'm asking the question, is the number one metric impact? Is the number one metric social transformation? Is the number one impact bettering the lives of people? Or is the number one impact valuation growth? So I don't really care for whether or not you've created a unicorn. I think it's a great story to sell to, I don't know, large investors and Silicon Valley type investors, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
But I'm more interested in, rather than having $1 billion valuation business, I'm interested in having 10, $100 million valuation businesses, but that have multiplied social inclusion in each of their societies. That, for me, is a lot more valuable than simply have we created unicorns. A friend of mine often says Africans shouldn't be trying to create unicorns. We should be trying to create zebras. So, there's only one unicorn. But if you go to the jungle, a plethora of zebras. We need more zebras. We need more of these businesses that can absorb more of the latent potential of young people. In my country, South Africa, 60 million people. 60 million people. Yeah. The unemployment rate of young people is well over 50%. I can't afford to be trying to build a unicorn that's going to make me a billionaire. What I should be trying to do is to create a business that's going to create opportunities for these young people. I think our thinking needs to change.
You have no idea how much validation you've just given me. I am, I make films and, sell directly to Africans. And so I'm in the process of trying to raise funds. And this is the conversation I've been telling them. Because a lot of the times, if you want someone to fund your film, they are asking if your TV show, your film is the next Squid Games, for example, because they want that global dominance.
Yes.
And I'm from the point of view where there's so many African stories, indigenous, authentic African stories, deeply rooted in, different tribes. We first need to tell those stories before we think of conquering the world.
I need to add something to that.
Yeah.
I think the fundamental question should be, what problem are we solving for? Right.
Yeah.
If the problem we're solving for is financial risk and reward, there is no way your business is going to outperform the financial risk and reward of any investor who could put money in the bond market.
Right.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What is the interest rate here in Kenya? Do you know?
The lending rate? From the banks, around 18%.
18%.
Yeah.
I can only imagine what the government 10-year T-bill is. Okay. So if I'm an investor, I could take my money and put it in a government T-bill.
Right.
With a risk-adjusted return, the risk part is zero. Right. It's the government. It's not going to default. Well, okay. You get the point that I'm making, right? Okay. So it's the government. It's not going to default. Which means I can put my capital, let's say that, I don't know, the 20-year T-bill, let's imagine it's at, 20% or whatever the case might be. I can put my money into that 10-year T-bill or 5-year T-bill.
Right.
I'm going to get a 20% return, and I'm assuming zero risk. Now when I come talk to you, first, you're a startup. You're founder-led. You are illiquid, which means you're not listed. If I put shares in your business, I can't go and trade them on an exchange, say. I've got to quantify each of these risks.
Right.
Which means you've got to generate 45% return before I take the meeting with you.
Oof.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so as an investor, there isn't sufficient financial incentive for me to put money in your business.
That's true.
So just go to Malawi. Just go to Malawi. Love Malawi. It's one of my favorite parts of the continent. Go to Zambia, and you'll see this. You see a similar thing, right? When there's capital available, liquid capital, particularly in wealthy circles, high net worth families, family offices, individuals, it migrates into real estate or T-bills.
That's true.
It doesn't go into the real economy. It doesn't finance businesses. It doesn't create new jobs.
No,
because we're chasing the wrong metric. We're chasing this metric around financial return. Now, I'm not saying don't chase financial return. I am saying what's the chief metric that you're solving for? If the Europeans were simply chasing financial metric, they wouldn't have had the developments they had in the 1800s.
That's true.
If the Americas were simply chasing for financial metric, they wouldn't have had the innovation they had in the 1900s. We have to solve for different set of metric than simply, am I generating a financial return? So it has to be blended is the point that I'm making. And I'm not sure that a lot of us are intentional about chasing a blended return.
No. So if we were to put it in one word, one sentence, what's the mindset that African entrepreneurs and businessmen should shift to?
Well, one of the things we're doing in our firm is we're changing our strategy, and we have done. We are now pursuing and investing in real businesses that sell real products to real consumers, create real economic value in the real economy.
Okay.
This is to say, I'm not interested in stuff that is, secondary economy, highfalutin, some tech-based, uber tech-based startup where all I'm doing is I'm chasing top-line growth, customer acquisition over LTVs, and I'm showing that I can acquire 1 million more customers in a new territory. The question we're asking is, okay, so you can acquire 1 million more customers in a new territory, but what is the real economic value of each of those customers, and what have you added into that new economy? If that part of the conversation is missing, then all we're going to do is we're going to reproduce the inequality that our continent has come from. We're going to have a very few high growth startup founders building these very large, very well capitalized, very valuable businesses, and then you're going to have a long tail of hundreds of thousands of young people trying to become part of the very small club of people building businesses, and that's not going to be sustainable. That's just my view.
Man, I am mind blown. You've grown with startups, and to the level of success, and so for our viewers, we call them classmates here because we are learning. So I'm sure you have steps of how from startup to scaling.
Yes.
What do those steps look like in this new age? What are the steps I need to follow to grow my business from a startup to a scale level?
So the first thing you need is a firm foundation. Firm foundation.
Okay.
What are the components of a firm foundation? The first component of a firm foundation is clarity on purpose.
Clarity on purpose.
In other words, what
why
are you clear on what you're doing and why you're doing it? And by the way, these two things are different. So I need clarity on what I'm doing and clarity on why I'm doing it. There's a reason for this. Often the why will stay the same, the what will change. And what a lot of entrepreneurs do is they spot a business opportunity, they find a business model, and they just start going.
Right.
But then the dynamics might change, or their own internal desires might change, and now they don't know what to do because the what needs to change, but the why needs to stay the same. So level one is just clarity. Are you clear?
Right.
Now, we have a set of questions we help entrepreneurs ask and answer, but are you clear on what is that? Right. So clarity on over the purpose. Right. The second part is a definition of what value is for you.
Okay.
The reason a lot of entrepreneurs find themselves having to change their story or their pitch decks when they're talking to other potential investors or accelerators is because you don't have clarity on how you've defined value. So what is true value for you, right? Is value the efficiency you introduce into a market? Is value the opportunity? There's a fintech startup I was looking at the other day, and they work in the remittances space. Now the very popular remittances space.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Every third founder you talk to is either in fintech and doing something to do with remittances.
Yeah, that's true.
But for them, the way that they have defined value isn't the amount of flows that they facilitate, although you would imagine this is one of the ways. It's the number of connections they build. In other words, it's not just how much flow is happening on their platform from one part of the world to the next part of the world, but it's how many people are using their platforms for those flows to take place. This is to say, they have this. They apportion the same amount of value to a flow of $10 as they do to a flow of $100.
Right.
For them, the fact that there are lanes of traffic is more important than how many cars are on the freeway. So you need clarity.
Yeah.
Second thing is you need to understand how do you define value. The third is you need to understand what your model is. Right. Both your business model and your operating model.
Right.
And these are very different, by the way.
Yeah.
Right? So operating model is around commercialization. It's around route to market. It's around customer relationship management.
Yeah.
And it's around also ensuring that the costs to run your business are lower than the value that you're adding into the system. Okay. All of these are component parts of your business model. The operating model talks a lot more to the systems that you're going to use, the processes that you're going to use, the data that you're going to get from your customers, and the technology you're going to use to build each of these. So then having clarity over what's my operating model, what's my building model. These 3 or 4 fundamental blocks give you a firm foundation for your business. So I know what I'm doing. I know why I'm doing it. I know how we're going to define, understand the value that we're adding. I know our business model and I know our operating model. Okay, now I'm ready to go. Absent of answering any of those questions, Now, notice I haven't said service, eh?
No.
I've said nothing about the service you're offering, the product you're offering, the price you're charging it at, the markets you're going to sell into. I've said nothing about strategy or tactics or differentiation.
Right.
I've said this is your firm foundation. Once you've got the foundation in place, then you can add on a product, you can add on a service, you can add on a country, you can add on an adjacency, you can add on a partner, because the foundation is in place. The foundation is in place. In the first 999 days of your business, your number one job as a founder is to build that foundation.
I think we all rush into business and the first thing we're thinking about is the service.
Of course. And the money.
Oof. Wow. Is there a gym for resilience? I mean, as an entrepreneur, as a business person, sometimes we run low on fumes, to keep going. I'd want you to speak on how we can build resilience.
Yeah, that's sorry. First, I'm interrupting you on purpose. First, there's an incredible book I have to recommend to all of the classmates here called Grit.
Grit. Okay.
Got to read that book.
Right.
It's a great read on how to define the thing that defines you, which is going to be the answer to the question.
Okay.
You run low on resilience when you don't have clarity on defining the thing that defines you. So when challenges come, and they will, the only reason you wake up the next day and do what you were doing the day before, even though it looks like you're not going to succeed, is because the thing pulling you, your drive, is much more powerful than the resistance you're facing. Resilience, in my mind, is a mathematical equation.
Right.
It's about ensuring that my purpose for doing what I'm doing on a scale weighs higher than the resistance I'm facing for doing the thing that I'm doing. Because the resistance will come. Right. So if you want to build resilience, clarity is everything, man. Clarity. You have to have clarity over why you're doing what you're doing and what you're doing. And by the way, financial return isn't clarity. Like saying, I want to make $100 million. That's why I said in the US, that's great. Because in the US, their economies are so well developed that in the US, the economies are so well developed that the most effective way an individual can contribute to their society is by creating new economic value and innovating. So they can found startups and say, I want to create a $100 million startup and I'm going to find a more efficient way to do X. For us, that's just not, it's not enough.
We're not there.
It's not enough. It's not enough. First of all, here, if you're $100 million valuation, you're definitely not a startup.
Oh, no. You're the biggest company.
You're the one everybody's trying to be.
Yeah,
right?
For sure.
So because the dynamics are different, I think that the thing you're chasing for has got to be different.
I mean, we've talked about resilience. Another question someone asked me during the Youth Plus was on mentorship and why it should be important. And I met a couple of founders who told me, I don't do the mentorship thing, but I know you're heavy on mentorship.
Yes.
Yeah. Just maybe speak on that and why that is crucial and important to anyone running a business.
The founders who said they don't do the mentorship thing, did they mean that they don't mentor others or that they are not being mentored?
They like if they were asked to name a mentor they talk to or a coach, they didn't have any.
Good luck with that. That sounds to me probably the single most ignorant thing I've heard in about a decade. And I hear a lot of ignorant things, but that sounds unbelievably stupid. And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
You do not, as a human being, have all the answers to all of the questions you're going to ask.
Yeah.
You don't have all of the solutions. And if you think of yourself so supremely capable and intelligent that you think you can navigate this road alone, I'll pray for you. That's all I'm going to offer for you. I will render for you a prayer, and I will put it in Psalm 27, 22 to 23 in my Bible. I will pray for you.
Okay.
It's just unintelligent. Man, listen, I know CEOs of listed companies that still have mentors.
Okay.
So I don't quite know what it is you hope to gain by saying, I don't do a mentor. I don't need mentors.
Right.
It just doesn't sound intelligent to me. I have mentors.
Yeah.
Right. So good luck with that.
Okay. You heard it here. Good luck with that.
Can I just say something?
Yeah, sure.
I think, though, that one of and I'd be keen to get how you think about the mentorship thing. But for me, when I think about a mentor, I define the area of my life where I need intervention. I've got a spiritual mentor.
Right.
I've got a financial mentor. I've got a mentor who talks to me and counsels me in areas of my family.
Okay.
I've got a mentor that I talk to in terms of my finances. These are different people. And so when people think mentor, they always think about this, older person sitting in a room somewhere, smoking cigars, giving them these wells of wisdom.
Yeah.
That's not always the case.
Right.
Sometimes it's just the person who, my spiritual mentor is somebody whose faith is so strong. I just don't understand how she moves.
Right.
Like we'll have conversations about things, and by the way, she's incredibly successful in business. Things that she's doing and struggles that she's having, and then the answer comes to faith, and I'm like, but this is not a faith problem. This is a regulatory problem. And she's like, God will fix it, and somehow
God fix it.
So for me, that's a person I look at and I go, I want to have the kind of faith that moves mountains. And so I would say, just define the area in your life where you think you are lacking.
Right.
If I'm a startup founder and a leader, maybe I need to learn how to manage people better.
Okay.
Maybe I need to learn how to lead people better. Maybe I need to learn how to be a better dad.
Right.
Maybe I need to learn how to be a better husband.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to learn how to be a better member of society. Maybe I need to learn how to, not be the person on Twitter attacking people. And so maybe there's something in my spirit I need to address. And for that, you can for sure find a person who can help counsel and guide you. But the idea that you live your life without a mentor, to me, just sounds ignorant and dangerous.
Amen. I love that. We look at you as a big brother in Africa as entrepreneurs, simply because you travel the world. You have a global view of Africa. And I don't know, I'm sensing like there's a lot of shift happening in the political space. And, you're from SA, so you guys in the US have been kind of...
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, what's happening here? Is this a more global dynamic shift that we're seeing happening around the world? This is me just being curious. I don't know what's happening there.
I think that we're in a period of a transition. And in that period of a transition, those who have held the levers of power don't want to let go. And those over whom that power has been exercised no longer want to submit themselves to that.
And this informs BRICS. You can
it
speak
informs
on that.
everything. It informs how presidents are engaging with each other. It informs how different tribes in different parts of the continent are engaging with each other. It informs how different nations across the continent are engaging with each other. We're in a period of a transition.
Right.
The second thing I will say to this is that we're also in a period of a transition. From my vantage, it appears as if the leadership models that worked in the past, control, command, dominate, don't work today.
No.
And they don't work because we're all hyper-connected. Artificial intelligence has made us infinitely more intelligent.
Right.
Just with the correct prompt, you can answer any problem.
That's true.
And so, as a consequence of that, any leader trying to use the old way of leadership in a decentralized, liberty-driven, freedom environment is not going to succeed. This is why there are parts of the continent today where young people take to the streets in protest.
Oh yeah.
And rather than leaders engage, they choose to react the way they would have reacted 20 years ago and gotten away with it.
That's true.
But 20 years ago, we didn't have the proliferation of the internet and new media and the ability to share information as we do today. You're in broadcast, so you know that 20 years ago, if something happened down the road here in Nairobi and you were a journalist, you would record that incident. You would put it in a reportage.
Right.
You would send it through to the newsroom. Later that evening, they would publish it as breaking news. Today, as it's happening, you go on your phone
Go live.
and you break the news yourself.
Absolutely.
And These changes means that the way we managed and led people is just not going to work in the world today. And then in the midst of all of this, you also have a generation of Africans like me and you who now, for the first time, realize, hold on, we're just as good as the other guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just think about the number of our peers. Think about some of the acquaintances and friends of mine who've been to some of the top schools in the world and gotten the highest level of qualification and then come back to their country and say, I'm going to build at home.
Right.
Means that we just don't see the rest of the world the way we saw the rest of the world.
That's true.
We now see ourselves as equals. They struggle because they see us the way their broadcast media taught them to see us.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
This kind of, Eddie Murphy landing in the US and coming to America one. Good morning, my neighbors. King Jaffe Joffer and this invented kingdom of Zamunda.
Yeah.
They still have, a lot of them still have that idea of who we are.
Right.
But we know that ain't who we are.
Nope.
And so the contestation you're seeing is when the past is trying to make the future look like the past. And the future goes, no, sir.
How do we collectively as Africans switch this narrative? Because if you ask me, I think the biggest problem we have as Africans is our leaders. Leadership. Leadership is one, they're still trying to run our economies using the geo blocks. And I'm sorry, with the digital age, you can have your company domiciled in South Africa, but it's the biggest company in Kenya.
True story.
Yeah, but they're still thinking along the borders. And then just what you spoke on, like they're still trying to lead like it's 20 years ago.
Sure.
How do we get these people to change? Because it just pisses me off when I see some decisions that our leaders make.
They're not going to change. Remember that systems, I don't know if you ever studied systems theory, right? But systems are, how do I explain this? Systems are functions of efficiency. The purpose of a system is to be as efficient as possible.
Right.
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 That is to say, systems don't self-correct.
No.
If you've ever been stuck in downtown Nairobi traffic, like I was yesterday, you know what I'm talking about is true, right? There is a particular system of how the roads move in downtown Nairobi traffic. At best, that system is going to be more efficient. But the road users are not going to pause everybody in the middle of traffic and say, hey guys, we're doing this wrong. Let's rather find another way to do it. Because we're all trying to get to where we're trying to get to as fast as possible.
Right.
Right. When you think about leaders leading our continent, you have to think about them in the same way. Their behavior is a function of the system they are in. So you don't, I think this is the mistake a lot of us make. The mistake we make is to assume that we can go to the ballot and vote and change the leader. The leader is not the problem. The system is. Because the system is creating the behaviors that you're seeing those leaders emulate. And those behaviors are giving us the outcomes that we see. So who are the most inspirational, transformative leaders that you and I look up to? It's not the people who made the system more efficient. No. It's the people who understood that the system was broken. In my country, we celebrate Nelson Mandela and his cadre of freedom fighters because they recognized the system was the problem.
Right.
That you could change whomever it was that was at the head of the apartheid government. But apartheid is still apartheid. The system is the system. So the question for us to ask ourselves isn't do we have the right leaders? It's do we have the right systems?
Damn.
So what is the system of governance here? What is the system of electing leaders here? What is the system of how you monitor leaders' performance here? And wherever in the continent you are, what is the system? There is a lot online, for instance, that is said about the young leader who was at the head of the government of Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré, right? He didn't come in and make the system more efficient.
No.
He removed it. And he's putting a new system in place.
Right.
This contestation we're having about the old and the new, the past and the future, is because the past is saying this system is the one we know. The future is saying, but this system doesn't work.
It's not working.
And that's why you're seeing conflict. That's why you're seeing contestation. That's why you're seeing the protests that you're seeing. That's why you're seeing young people turn around and say, I'm just disillusioned with this leader. Now, we must be careful not to seek easy answers for complex problems. The easy answer is that if you remove Vusi and put you there, the outcome is going to be different.
No.
It ain't.
No.
It's the system. The real question is, what system is in place that puts Vusi there? And how do we ensure that that system serves our needs, not the needs of the people inside it? That's why we have, career politicians in Africa.
Yeah.
People who've never worked a commercial day in their lives. They started out in student politics, and their entire lives they've worked in public administration.
Right.
And then you take that person and you put them as the head of the small business development department, or you put them as the head of the tax commission, or you put them as the head of the competition commission. They have never worked in private enterprise. So they don't have the other view of what competition looks like. They don't have, and even if they do, it's an academic view. They went and studied it.
Right.
They haven't done it. And that's not a criticism, it's a statement of fact. So the question is, if that system is created, if we have a system that creates career politicians, then the question we need to ask ourselves is, why is that? And does it serve our needs? And if it does, keep it. And if it doesn't, then every generation at some point in time has the responsibility to ask itself, is the thing we are doing serving our generational mission? Yesterday, sorry, very quickly.
No.
I went to the National Archives yesterday here in Kenya.
Right.
Fascinating. I'm a history student. Okay. I love if you and I could spend a weekend away and just talk history.
No.
That's it. Nothing. I don't want to talk business. I don't want just history. Tell me about the history of something.
Right.
And I think one of the tour guides really struggled with me yesterday because I'm also very curious. So, when you go through like a museum, somebody will tell you something.
Yes.
Yeah, I will ask why.
Why?
So you go, the sky is blue. I'll go, why?
Why?
Then you go, well, it's blue because that's the color. And I'll go, why? I'm that guy, right? So anyway, yesterday I'm going through the archive. Man, I must tell you. Yeah. So I learned about the Mau Mau resistance movement.
Yeah.
I learned about the terrible, terrible things that were done by the British colonizers here.
Yeah.
Then I'm looking at one of these posters that you guys have on the wall, and it talks about the British colonizers, and it says they came here as adventurers and teachers, and I was like, who wrote this bullshit? Excuse my language.
No,
I was like, who wrote this? Yeah. And what I can't digest is how in 2025...
no one has questioned that.
No one has questioned that it says they came as adventurers and liberators, and they brought with them all of these innovations. Yeah, you know what else they did? They also took land and maimed people and set tribe against tribe and murdered people en masse. There are still, I don't know if you know this, there are still archives of your history here that were supposed to be delivered by the British 10 years ago that are still not here today.
Yeah.
Right. So who wrote this history? Well, I'm not a rocket scientist. I'm trying to figure out how is this? Do you see what I'm saying?
I'll give you a simple answer. All our museums and archives are still run by British money.
I mean,
yeah.
And so for me, the question then becomes, what is the system that perpetuates that? Now, there are some people who will watch this and say, I cannot believe he's daring to attack the British Empire. And I'm not attacking anybody. I'm just giving you an accurate reflection of history.
Right.
You don't got to fight me.
No.
You just got to read the history books.
Yeah.
And the history books will tell you about what happened. The history books will tell you today that there are still unmarked graves of freedom fighters who brought the liberation of the people of Kenya to Kenya today.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. So unless, and this is, by the way, a struggle South Africa has, unless you're willing to own all of the injustices you've committed in the past, you can't talk about how do we build an inclusive future. And there is this attempt almost to tell a little bit of the past. And then say, okay, we've told you enough now, full stop, now let's move on. That contestation is going to continue to feed this contestation between the past and the future. Oof. That's a sidebar, sorry.
Yeah, no. I love it. You just made this issue even more complex because how do you fix a system?
How do you fix a system? So for instance, when I was learning about the history of resistance here, and then I learned about the role that agriculture played in the history of resistance, that a big part of what the rest of the world would call sustenance agriculture was actually agriculture that fed the freedom fighters who were in the bush fighting for freedom. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And I thought, and so I can't now digest why so few agri startups get sufficient support from the government? Because if you understood the role that the sector played in the liberation that brought you here, why wouldn't you back it? I'm confused by this. Unless you have a disconnection with your history.
Right.
And you just don't understand what it is that you're supposed to be doing. Unless.
I think in Kenya we say colonialism never ended. It just changed faces. I think we're still heavily run by colonialists. A lot of the systems, if you ask me. But, that's neither here nor there. I have a feeling you and I will be meeting a lot more times, having more conversations. I mean, I'm just manifesting it out there because I know we've run out of time. So I'm going to ask 3 questions that we always ask here. I know you're a best-selling author. However, what are your top 3 books that you'd recommend to our classmates?
Top 3 books. I'm going to go business books. I could say, and I probably should say the Bible.
Yeah.
But I take it that people are going to know that that's penciled in. So I'll give you business books.
All right.
The first would be Jim Collins' Good to Great. Great read.
Okay.
It's reading Good to Great, man, is like it's like hearing Pachelbel Canon in D minor. When you hear it, you're just like, oh, I know that song. Everybody knows that song, right? You don't have to attend a classical school to know Pachelbel Canon. Reading Good to Great is one of those. It's a great, great book. Every single entrepreneur, no matter what stage you're at, even if you're just a person working in corporate,
right?
You need to read Jim Collins' Good to Great.
Good. Okay.
In fact, you need to read all of Jim Collins, right? So that would be the first.
Right.
The second would be Clayton Christensen's Innovation's Dilemma, The Innovator's Dilemma.
Okay.
Unbelievable read. It's a great way to understand how markets function and how the pursuit for efficiencies creates inefficiencies that creates the need for innovation. It's a great read. Truly, truly a great read. And if I were to offer a third book,
it could be your book. Plug it in.
Yeah, I mean. Also pencil in Magna Carta of Exponentiality. Okay. If you haven't read it,
right,
you got to get it. We're just glad God has got us doing the work that we're doing. So if you can pick up the Magna Carta, for sure do it. It's a collector's now, so you can't find them.
Yeah.
But if you can, you should.
Right.
The third book, though, for any person seeking to understand where the world is now. An incredible African sister of ours who used to work at the World Bank, Dambisa Moyo, wrote a book called How the West Was Lost. She wrote a book called Dead Aid, which actually made her famous.
Okay.
But she followed that up with a book called How the West Was Lost. And her latest book is called Leading at the Edge of Chaos. Okay. But How the West Was Lost is an interesting understanding of the geopolitics of the world today and where Africa finds itself. This contestation between the East, which is based on transactionary relationship, and the West, which is based on a colonial history, and how both of them are in the struggle for what the future looks like. It's a great book. She opens it up with the "Give me liberty or give me death," kind of American treatise. It's a great book. Great book.
Yeah.
Have you read any of them?
None of them.
None of these books?
None of these books.
Oh, man.
Man, I was about to ask you, when do you get the time to read?
All the time. I mean, you know, the desk behind you, you could see there. My Bible is there because I was reading that yesterday. My tablet is open because I was reading that as well. So yeah, you gotta. Yeah. Have you read Carol Dweck's work? Carol Dweck wrote a book called Growth Mindset.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got to be in it.
Yeah.
Have you read any of John Cotter's work? John Cotter wrote a book called Accelerate. So if you want to understand how markets work and efficiencies work and how we need to innovate in the modern day, you've got to read that work. There's a fantastic book written by a lady called Mukoni. I forget her first name. Now lives in South Africa. And she wrote a book called Who Owns Who. Oof. It's a great book when you want to understand how capital works and how capital creates the illusion of diversification. So something like, quickly. Something like you go to a retailer, and you'll see 3 brands of washing powder.
Right.
You'll think these are competitors, but they're all owned by Unilever.
That is.
And so in her book, she shows you who owns whom, and you really begin to see that capital concentrates itself. In the marketplace, it looks diversified.
Yeah.
But if you begin to ratchet up and you actually have a look, you'll realize it's 3 or 4 players that own 80 or 90% of the market. Great book. Great book. If there is one thing classmates, where they?
Yeah.
If there is one thing classmates take
there.
from today.
That's your camera.
Classmates, hear me, come here. If there is one thing you take from this conversation, you gotta read. You've got to read.
Right.
You've got to read.
Right.
And then lastly, and I tweeted this yesterday, you have the right to put a book down that's bad. If you pick it up and you're 10 pages in and it doesn't talk to you, throw it away and read the next thing. But you've absolutely got to read. There's another book, great book to read right now.
Yeah.
I forget the author. I'm actually just busy with it, called The Psychology of Stupidity. It is a fascinating read. And one of the things you realize when you read this book is how there is no relationship between power and intelligence.
Oh, man. Oh, yeah.
And I'm going to leave it very much there.
Yeah, let's leave
without
it there.
saying much.
Give
It's
us
a great book.
a stranger than fiction story, something that happened in your life. And, whenever you tell the story, people won't believe you, but you're like, it happened, guys. It happened. Stranger than fiction story.
For me?
Yeah.
Oh, this is a true story. Good one. I was in Beverly Hills many years ago.
Okay.
Beverly Hills. And in fact, I was in Los Angeles.
Right.
And I was doing some work in Los Angeles. I want to say it was my first or second time there, doing some work in Los Angeles. And I was like, I've always seen Eddie Murphy in Beverly Hills Cop. Remember?
Yeah.
Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, that movie.
Yeah.
So I'd always seen him. I was like, I've got to go to Beverly Hills. So, this is the world pre-Uber.
Yeah.
And so I caught a cab from my hotel, went to Beverly Hills, went to the boulevard, the Beverly Hills Boulevard, right? I was there now at the beginning of the year,
Yeah.
the Beverly Hills Boulevard, and you walk down the boulevard and it's all these like fancy shops.
Right.
And right towards the end of the boulevard, it kind of has a T section, and there is a hotel there. I forget the name of the hotel, but it's a very famous hotel.
Right.
The hotel has 3 doors, and each of these are revolving doors with a doorman on each of them.
Okay.
So I go into this hotel,
Yeah.
and I'm just like, I'm in Beverly Hills. I'm going to have myself a croissant. So I sit in this hotel and I order a cappuccino and a croissant,
Right.
just to let them know I've made it also.
Yeah. I'm in America.
I'm in America. So I have my cappuccino, I have my croissant, and I'm leaving.
Right.
Now, in 1987,
Yeah.
Eddie Murphy starred in a movie alongside John Witherspoon
Okay.
and Halle Berry and Martin Lawrence. The name of the movie is called Boomerang.
Okay.
The title track of the movie is by a band called PM Dawn.
Okay.
Go watch the movie.
Right.
I can't explain it to you. But when I was growing up, I saw Eddie Murphy in that movie, and I was like, I'm going to be like that guy. He plays this really successful ad executive who lives as a bachelor in Washington, D.C.
Right.
And he's very successful, and he's smooth, and he's well-dressed, and the ladies love him. He's on his Cool J.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm going to be like that one day.
Yeah.
But on that movie, I fell in love with Halle Berry.
Okay.
Fell in love. So I'm now in my hotel. I finished my cappuccino and croissant.
Yeah.
I get up to leave,
Right.
and I'm walking out of the hotel.
Right.
It's the revolving door,
Yeah.
and I was on my phone doing something, and coming into the revolving door,
Yeah.
Halle Berry.
Ooh.
I'm not kidding.
Oh.
I must tell you, by the way, I was wearing one of these these African print shirts
right.
because I wanted them to know I'm from Africa.
Yeah.
So I'm wearing one of these African print. Halle Berry walks into this door. She's with her security, but it's a revolving door. So the security has to wait for the door to revolve for them to come in.
Right.
She comes into this door. I'm about to walk into the door. As she's coming out, I walk right into her. I'm looking right at her. I look.
Yeah.
I love my life. But if Halle Berry phones tomorrow, Halle, she phones tomorrow.
Talk to her. Yeah.
So I'm just like, this is the Halle Berry.
Yeah.
This is woman of my dreams since I was an 8-year-old boy.
Right.
She walks right into me. But when I say she's closer to me than you are now,
Yeah.
right? And she looks at me and she says, oh, that's a really nice shirt. And all I said to her was, I'm Zulu. It's like, oh, man.
That was your moment.
That's it. That
was your moment.
I was just like, dude, you are a public speaker. You wield words for a living. And here she was, and that's all he said. And so she looked at me. She was like, she gave me this look like maybe I'm a bit intellectually challenged. And then she just shook her head and walked away. And that was that. And so, Haley, if you're watching this,
you'd want to take two.
If I bumped into her again,
Yeah.
I've written the whole line about what I'm going to say now. So, stranger than fiction story. There.
I love it. Vusit, thank you so much for your time. I was going to end with, wishing you all the best in getting a Kenyan wife. But, Haley is right over there.
No. I've got this incredible, beautiful partner. She's the love of my life.
Right.
Her last name is Jesus. And so I think my Lord and Savior brought her into my life. And I'm very blessed and I'm very happy.
Okay. Thanks again. Thank you for your time, man. I really enjoyed this. I hope we get to do a lot more of this.
I'm looking forward to it.
All right, man. Thank you.
Asante.